few days after the game at the weekend. What's been the main takeaway as you've analysed and looked back at it?
Yeah, I think lots to build on. Lots of really good things to build on. I thought, the first half, I thought there was loads to be delighted about. We've done, really well to get ourselves in front at half time and into the later stages of the game. And of course, difficult in the end to take. But I think again, as I've really spoke about the last few weeks, it's about making sure that we're finding the balance of looking at the positives of being a hard team to beat, but having a footprint in the games where we can create chances and score some goals, and really nice to get a set piece goal as well. So, I think it was about us clinging on to what we really liked about it, and once again, trying to influence the things that we think we can do better.
I know you were asked about Marco Silva's comments straight after the game, but I wondered if there's any sort of pride to be taken from an unhappy opposition manager, because it shows that you're not rolling over at home anymore.
Yeah, and look, I have no issue with anyone's opinion on the game, and as a bit of a backhanded compliment, I think in the end really, that we were a frustrating team to play against on the day, and that's what we want to be. We want to be a team that finds a way to cause our opponents problems, and for large chunks of that game, we've certainly done that.
What are your thoughts on your next opponents, Leicester? What have you made of their last few games?
Yeah, look, I think they're a team that have got. They've got some versatility to the way they play. We know that just like us, they'll be drumming home that there's pride at stake here, and their personality on the pitch is going to be important for both teams. So we know that there's an element of that we're going to have to face, even though we are away from home. But there's no easy Premier League games out there. Every game presents different challenges at this level. And although they might have had some difficult home form, they've also picked up some half decent results away from home, particularly the Brighton game. So, the same message, we're going to have to be at our best to get something out of the game. It's a team that got promoted with us last year, and has also had a fairly difficult season overall. So, but for us, it's about going into the game on the front foot and making sure that we're in the best nick to beat our opponent.
I realise every game's an opportunity, but does it feel like a particularly grabbable one?
Yeah, I guess I've got to find the balance with that, haven't I? It's the next game. I've said every week that you focus on the merits of the next game and the opportunities that are within it from our perspective. But look, they're still a team that we have to respect the fact that they are ahead of us in the table, with a significant amount of points. So we have to be very respectful about our opponent. And I'm certainly not going to be thinking anything other than this is going to be a tough game, and we're going to have to do all of the things that we've done well in the last 3 games in the same way, and hopefully a little bit more, and if we want to get something out of the game, there's going to be we're not going to be taking our half on the ball based on someone else's form.
I know you always have to be aware of every good player you're up against, but do you have to be sort of any extra wary of Jamie Vardy's farewell tour?
Yeah, these are all stories, aren't they? Ultimately, for me, it's a game that we break down, and how do we win it? How do we? But yeah, look, obviously, it's more about his qualities still rather than his, the story behind a celebration in any way of his farewell tour. So for me, it's about making sure that we're dealing with what his strengths are and what Leicester's strengths are on the day, and bringing our strengths, trying to find the cracks within them, and obviously Jamie Vardy will be part of that.
How strong is your squad looking? What's your team doing?
Yeah, we're in good health. We're in good health. Obviously, Paul's been training the last couple of days, so he's back in the mix. So that's good news. But yeah, across the board, we've had good training numbers this week, big training numbers. So yeah, we've got a pretty much a clean bill of health as we stand here today.
I know we asked you in your first press conference about Adam Lallana. Is there any possibility of him being on the bench? He sort of feels like he'd be the perfect guy to bring on to help see out games. Yeah,
I think again, Adam's, in terms of his play, and that sort of decision is solely with him at the minute. But building up to this game, Adam's certainly on the coaching staff, and that'll be a similar format this weekend as well.
And then just in a wider element of the club, I remember a few years ago, Ralph Hasenhüttl was given the task of creating a playbook for every age group to work from. Every coach was going to work the sort of a similar way through the club, and then since he's gone, the first team style of play has varied quite dramatically under different managers, and I wondered how that reflects down the age groups since. Like when you're under 21s manager, do you then follow the style that the senior manager's doing? Does your successor now do that with you, or does this club have its own style throughout again?
Yeah, I think it's a good question actually. Probably one I wasn't expecting. What do I think on that? I think, obviously I've got my background is, helping players make that last step into first team football. And I think probably I've seen it done in lots of different ways. I've seen clubs fall into line, pretty much everyone look the same and go after the exactly same way of playing with and without the ball. And then, I've worked at Brighton where the principles are similar, but there's a bit of flexibility for people to grow and learn. My personal belief is if you want adaptable thinkers and players that can think on their feet and adapt to their environment around them, then you need coaches at younger age groups that can be adaptable as well. So I think as long as your principles are aligned, I think there's room to let players be curious and coaches be curious, slow it down and learn, sometimes through mistakes, sometimes through it not going so well. I personally would rather not view things as black and white from under 9s all the way to first team, because I think that takes away a bit of the freedom and expression of what football is. And I think younger players need to have that freedom of expression when they play, and younger coaches as well. That's where you do your best learning. So, how that drives performance at first team level, I think the outcome can still be a really, really good one. But I don't think there's any right or wrong way in football. There's no right or wrong way to play the game. If you play a short passing game, it's your game. If you play more direct style, that's your game. And I think, for players younger to experience lots of different ways of football and almost not have a snobbery about it, really. That's just my personal view. So for me, I think there's lots of different ways of doing it. There's lots of different ways of winning games of football. There's lots of different ways to develop football players. And every club will have their different take. Me, I maybe sit somewhere in the middle. The principles can be aligned, but I think there has to be that, curiosity of how people learn and how people can try different things at different times.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Actually, seeing as it was such a good question, of course, and I think having ex-players coaching who've had experience of the real game at a senior level, with the playbook necessarily going right through, you can't pass on all your stuff you've learned necessarily if you've got to keep to a format. So when you look at the people coming in, there's always an argument against sort of coaches who've come with badges and coaches who've played the game, isn't there? And that's an interesting mix. I think sometimes we've gone too far the other way, and you need people who've played the game. Yeah,
maybe. I mean, look, there's it's quite a broad conversation, really. There's lots of different parts of this, I think, but it's what I think in particularly around development of younger players. A little bit of everything is quite a nice mix. So you've got that player who's recently retired, but it's not the finished article as a coach on his coaching journey, but he's got the reality, the referential experience, the immediate referential experience of what the game actually is. Because sometimes, the idea of what professional football actually is to what it might be perceived to be for a younger player can be a slightly different thing. So that's really healthy. But then, I've worked when I was making my first coaching steps. I worked with some, older coaches. I mean, late 60s that had not just good football experience, but had good life wisdom, that understood, young children and handle with care in terms of their thoughts and their feelings. And so that balance of different life perspectives, different football experiences, maybe some people that have come from a teaching background who might be blended with a recently retired ex-player who's, quite abrupt in terms of the communication. So there's lots of different ways. I think it's quite an interesting topic for me. I'm quite passionate about that, actually.
Of course. We've had a lot of young players signed from academies at Saints in the last few years who haven't really had much senior football. So I always think that if they've just played in academies and not been exposed to what it's really like, because they've either been coached by academy coaches who've not played the game at a senior level, that's a heck of a jump for them to make. And we've seen that some of them haven't quite been able to make it instantly from that football to men's football.
Yeah, I mean, and there's no there's no handbook you pull out and tell someone what their journey to be a professional footballer is going to look like. It's going to be unexpected, unpredictable, full of adversity, full of great times, which can be every bit as threatening. When you're a young player and you things are going really, really well, and you've got to make sure your foot stays on the gas and you don't listen to the noises out there, and all of a sudden you're driving a nice new car, and all of these things, they're people. They're people, and they need good influences around them and consistency. So it can be a bumpy road, and there's lots of different ways at how you arrive there. But my thing is and I do stand by this. No matter what age of player I've worked with, whether it's 32 or whether it's 16 and just breaking through, there's always room for reflection and development as an individual, and that's certainly something I'm standing by now as well.
You've come close in being in charge to getting you the win that you'd love to have, of course, before the end of the season. And I did say to somebody this week, I'm more excited about this game than I have been probably for weeks or months, I don't know, because it's Leicester and because of the way they've been going, and because if I was in your changing room, I'd be thinking the players would be treating this not like a cup final, but like a game which is an even contest. Here we go. And is there a bit of that? Are they buzzing this week in training because they know they're going to play Leicester?
I have to say that the approach is very similar to what it has been the last 3 games, and I'm sorry to not, sort of like add the fire to your flames there. And but look, the lads have been focused in every game. We want to win every game. We want to give a good account of ourselves, and I think we have overall. I really think we have. So, it's about we have to be measured in our approach, but we have to have belief. And we're very close to what had been a really, really positive result last week for us at the end. So, we know the evidence is there the last couple of games. If we can be solid and we can look to improve and build on what we've done, that we can be confident of causing problems. But the overall energy has been excellent every week in terms of the focus going into these games. And again, it's just been more of the same this week from what I've seen. Can you be more front-footed through the 90 minutes against Leicester than you can be, say, against Fulham or away at West Ham or Villa? Yeah, again, I can, I can understand the question, but I think
maybe confident.
Yeah, of course, but I also think we have to be realistic about the situation I inherited. With 7 games to go, we've we have had some very difficult results this season. We are bottom of the league. There's no dressing that up, and what we haven't been able to do and was never going to be able to do was be able to become solid and be in games at all stages, and at half time of all of these games we're either drawing or in front, to be solid, to shut that, to be dominant with the ball, and to create loads of chances. I mean, I think if we'd done them things looking at where the 7 games are at, I'd probably be able to bring world peace as well. So I've had to pick a way for this team to be, based on the evidence of the season. And I think if I'd done anything other than that, it'd be completely reckless. So we've had to find a way of being for these 7 games. And I think, people that turn up would understand that. I've not inherited a team mid-table where we can flow into games and we're going to create chances and we're going to get clean sheets. The evidence isn't there for that. No. So for me to build a game plan without that evidence would be frankly stupid.
What I've actually said to people is, if there had been approach games like they have in the last few games, the whole season, they will have more points on the board.
And again, it's not for me to
play extreme styles.
Yeah, and it's not for me to criticise what's gone before, because it's a hard job. It's a hard job. But all I've done is inherit the situation, support the players as best I can, try and come up with something which I think gives them a chance to, achieve success in these games. Try and give the supporters something to really get behind and identify with in the short term. And let's be right, it's an hard job. It's one that I'm, loving and I'm very proud and honoured to do. But it wasn't an easy situation to inherit a team relegated with 7 games to go. And I think what my aim was that the players show pride, show fight, show spirit. Make sure that we're putting the team first. And my job, as best as I can in the situation, was to come up with a formula that I think gives them a chance to get points on the board or be in games. We're in the game against West Ham. It's not took away from us and we get a point. We're 1-0 up on 70 minutes against a team chasing Europe on Saturday. That's excellent. It's an achievement. Do we have to try and find another way to give us that little bit more if we find ourselves sinking in where the players are naturally protecting the lead, which is completely normal given the season? Yeah, we do. But I also have to find the balance with that. So yeah, look, we're excited about Saturday. Absolutely right. We believe it's a game we can go into and get something out of. But it's also, Leicester will be saying the same things, and that's the mutual respect there is at the top level of the game. So we have to be at our best.
Just finally from me, lovely to see Ross Stewart start a game. The poor bloke's had such a terrible couple of years. Yeah. How's he reacted to that? Not only necessarily on the training ground, but physically, because it would have been a load for him that he wasn't used to carrying.
Yeah. Do you know what? I thought he'd done great. I thought, for how long he's been out in terms of starting the game, and it's an intense game. That was a really important game for Fulham, as it was us. So I thought he gave really good account of himself, and for him to get through it and be training again this week, and trying to get back in the starting team again for this Saturday. What a great thing for him, and a real positive from the day.
Yeah, well, that's the biggest thing, isn't it? That he recovers from it enough to train without any side effects.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so we were all delighted for him.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Okay, for 10:30, Alfie.
Thanks, Jordan. Hi, Simon. Just on what Adam asked a minute ago, all season we've had fans saying, why do Saints play 5 at the back? Why don't they go 4-3 or 4-3, whatever it is? Third manager who's played 5 at the back. In your opinion, why is that the best solution with these players?
Has it been 5 at the back all season?
For a lot of it.
Have there been games where it's a 4?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, I think there has. Maybe some of them panned out well and some of them didn't pan out so well. And again, I think for me, I've got to have a professional eye on that. And I would think as well, given the first manager played it, the second manager played it in different ways, and the third manager is playing it in a different way, we can't all be miles away from our assessments of what's best for the players. So there's different ways of playing it, but I could pause the button in a game a lot and it would look like a 4. It's systems within systems sometimes. I think very much now people get drawn on a number. It's just a number that's wrote down, but actually when you look at the game, it might look at like different things at different times. But I think it's not for me to comment on why Russell would have done what he done. It's absolutely not for me to comment on what Ivan would have done. It's for me to focus on what I'm doing. So what I'm doing is seeing that as a situation where, if we're being honest, there's been some really, really difficult days and nights for the football club this year with, some defeats which were quite heavy at times. So for me, I've looked at that and gone, right, I don't want that. We don't want that. We don't want the game to be took away from us at any point. We want to be in the games. We want to be in front. We want to be level as a minimum. What's the best chance of doing that? Because there hasn't been any games this year really where we've gone out and we've gone 1-2-3 up. So I can't think that that's going to happen over my next 7 games. I've not got, one, I haven't got the time, and 2, the evidence of the season suggests that that's not going to happen. So how can I help the players to make sure the game never gets took away from us? Which has happened a lot. So for me, at the moment, that is the logical solution which fits with the game plan that myself and the players are coming up with. And that's it. I'm not making this decision so that I don't think it can help us win a game. I'm making this decision because I think it can help us win the game. And I think it gives the players the right level of balance and build. What I haven't got, I'm 4 games into taking something. So I'm, in some respects, this would be like my 3rd pre-season game with some of our functions in the team. There's only so much you can influence on the grass, and there's only so much at this stage of the year that you can get into a team. So I've had to come up with a blend of what I think the most intelligent thing is, what gives the players the best chance to be confident, what can we get behind. And I have to say, for the last 3 games, a lot of the evidence suggests that it's worked.
Absolutely. Can I ask about Wellington as well? How many conversations have you had with him? How disappointed is he in how it's gone? Because when he arrived in January, I thought his first few games he did really well.
Yeah, again, I think it's something that weighs heavy on me. When you're leaving players out who are training well every day, and he is a great lad, a great lad. And I do think at times, my times at Brighton where I saw overseas players come in and, the language, it takes time to adjust to the environment, to the language, to quickly pick up information. So all of them things are at play with Wellington, and he's basically settling into what's been, probably a baptism of fire in terms of the second half of the season for him. So Wellington's, he's he's definitely not doing anything wrong from that point of view. He's training really well, and he any time he could get that opportunity. So it's a case of me just finding a bit of continuity at the minute as well. And there's lots of players that I'm sure and have asked questions about what we've got to do to be in the team. But I did feel the team needed a little bit of continuity. I did feel maybe things needed to settle down, and given that we wasn't going to have a lot of time, and I wasn't going to be able to, I was going to take it a different way from Russell and Ivan in terms of some principles and philosophies. I was, and maybe settling the team down was the best chance for that to happen. And there's been victims of that.
I suppose there is no reason to take Ryan Mangan out of the team, so it is difficult for him. But you still feel he has that encouragement, that desire to I suppose fight for his place and to be a Southampton player.
Yeah, everyone has to, because at the end of the day, it's a cliche, but we're all professionals here, and there's the one word that I wanted to hit home with the players on day one was that what I want to do is be respectful about this situation. I want to support you, I want to be honest, and I want to show respect, and in turn, hopefully, you can give me that back in this space of time. And every single player's done that. So, Wellington's trained, as everyone has. You've got Joe Aribo, Will Smallbone, and there'll be other players sitting on the bench that aren't screaming at me now that have contributed to this season and will feel they can contribute. And I'm sure they'll be disappointed that they've not been selected or got on the pitch the last couple of games. But I can only ask them to be great professionals, train hard every day, and when you get your opportunity, take it. And that's been the case so far.
Excellent.
Cheers. Simon, can I ask you about Paul Anawachu and Ross Stewart? Because when you brought Ross off on the weekend, Fulham obviously then go and score their 2 goals after it, and you've kind of had to totally change the look of the forward line, bringing Cameron Archer on. Is having 2 players who are more like for like, and you can keep that same forward line, is that going to be massive against Leicester?
Yeah, again, it's there's you changing the pattern of the game. I think up and down the country Saturday, I'm sure maybe 40% of the teams with a lead are sinking in the second half, and everyone, the manager is shouting, maybe get out. The fans want them to squeeze up. So sometimes it's more about a natural instinct, a feeling with a team that they protect something. So whether it's about a different type of personnel to give us something different, I can see where that can be an argument, and we have to adapt. And that might be the bit of evolution that I'm talking about, that we find that slightly different way with different players come onto the pitch at different times. And just with physicality, sometimes it does look a little bit different, and you do have to find different ways. But then how do we use the attribute and strength that's been brought onto the pitch? So again, that's the challenge, and it's not an easy challenge. It's a difficult balance, particularly when you're leading or drawing, and trying to swing the momentum of a game is one of the most difficult things. And sometimes you're hoping it's something that happens naturally. The question is, how do we find a way to adapt to the best attributes we have on the pitch? And on the top line, of course it's going to look a little bit different if you've got Cam as opposed to Paul. But that's something obviously we've been looking at and hoping that we can get a good outcome with.